My father always stood a little taller in rooms where he believed he owned something. That morning in probate court, he stood very tall. "The 3 vacation homes in the Florida Keys are ours," he said, his hands resting confidently on the edge of the table. "We've looked after them for years, paid the taxes and the upkeep. My mother meant for them to stay in the family." The wording was careful. Intent. Family. Ours. My mother nodded beside him, calm and supportive. She had chosen a soft blue suit, friendly but still dignified. I sat at the opposite table with my attorney and a thin folder that looked unimpressive compared to their stack of photos. Holiday dinners, fishing trips, grandchildren on docks at sunset. They had brought memories. I had brought paperwork. The houses were modest cottages, 3 waterfront properties bought over 10 years and slowly renovated. My grandmother had called them her storm shelters, both real and financial. She trusted solid assets more than markets. When she started planning her estate, I was the only one who showed up regularly to the meetings. Not because I was the favorite, but because I listened. She didn't want the properties sold. She didn't want them split up quickly. And she was aware, painfully aware, of how fast my parents treated shared assets like automatic rights. So she created a trust and named me the trustee. At the time, my father had laughed. "Paperwork," he said. "Your grandmother loves paperwork." I didn't correct him. Now he was asking the court to dissolve that same trust, arguing that I had failed to act in the family's best interest by refusing to transfer the deed ownership directly to him. He described me as stubborn, distant, unwilling to cooperate. He did not mention that I had offered structured use agreements, maintenance budgets, and equal scheduling access. Control for him was not about access. It was about the title. When his attorney finished explaining the petition, my lawyer stood. He didn't begin with an argument. Instead, he handed a sealed envelope to the clerk. "Your Honor, we ask that you review Exhibit D before ruling on standing." Judge Martinez, in his late 60s, calm and unhurried, adjusted his glasses and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter my grandmother had written 6 months before she passed away. Not a change to the will, not a formal legal notice, just a letter addressed to the trustee, to me. The courtroom grew quiet in that particular way rooms do when paper suddenly becomes heavier than voices. The judge read silently at first, then unexpectedly a small breath of sound escaped him. Not quite laughter, more like recognition. "Well," he murmured, "this is interesting." My father shifted slightly in his seat. Judge Martinez looked up. This letter describes concerns about earlier attempts by certain family members to pressure for a direct title transfer. He turned a page. It also clearly states that the trustee must keep full control over any sale, transfer, or restructuring of the Florida properties to prevent sudden liquidation. He removed his glasses and looked directly at my father. "Mr. Bennett, this letter contradicts your testimony about your mother's intentions." My father's face didn't fall dramatically. It simply drained of color. My mother's hand tightened around her purse strap. Judge Martinez continued, his voice steady. "The trust instrument remains valid. The trustee has acted within her authority. This petition to dissolve the trust appears unsupported by both the trust terms and documented intent." He paused, just long enough for the meaning to settle. Petition denied. There was no gavel slam, no raised voice, just the official record. Outside the courtroom, the hallway felt warmer than it should have. My father approached first. "You blindsided us," he said quietly. "I considered that the letter had existed for years, filed, organized, easy to find." "I followed the terms," I replied. "This is family property," my mother added, her voice thinner now. "It still is," I said, "just not individually owned." They didn't argue further, because the argument had already ended. The 3 homes remain in the trust. They're maintained on schedule, rented sometimes to help with costs, and available to family under structured agreements. My parents still visit one of them each winter. They sign the usage contract now. The first time my father sent the signed form back to me, I noticed his signature was smaller than usual. I don't feel victorious. I feel precise. My grandmother expected pressure, so she built protection into the structure. I simply honored it. What unsettles my parents isn't that they lost property. It's that they lost the assumption. For years, they mistook silence for surrender. They thought my quiet handling of the logistics meant I had no leverage. In court, leverage didn't need volume. It needed memory and documentation.
The next time I visited the Keys, the tide was low and steady. The houses stood where they always had, unaffected by courtroom drama. Ownership, I've learned, is less about who speaks the loudest and more about who prepares the longest. I didn't destroy anything. I just refused to hand it over. And sometimes that alone is enough to make people pale.